So yes, my name's Laurie Dodd, or as I'm known on Facebook, I'm Laurie Tyler Dodd. That's relevant because on Facebook I am the head of the admin team for the Virginia Native Plant Society group on Facebook, where we answer a lot of questions about native plants. And so there are 97,000 members who see me as Laurie Tyler Dodd and know my name even if I haven't met them. So that's kind of confusing. I do have my own background as undergraduate school doing a degree in biology at Duke University. At the time, I wasn't sure if I wanted to go into nature and science as a career or law school. So I did law school, but that chapter's done now. And my current work and play are all about nature. So I am a certified Virginia Master Naturalist, and these days I'm working with a native plant landscaping company that is imaginatively named Native Plant Landscape Design. You may not be able to remember it, but you can always find it on an internet search. And so I've been a member of this church here for 20 years. And I've been involved with the garden off and on throughout a lot of that time. But a big milestone for the garden was when Ed and Ellen McLaren made a going away gift to the congregation of a huge makeover for our garden. And we are still benefiting from that. It still forms the structure of what we've got in the garden. At that time, our garden was more of what we called a permaculture garden. So we were growing a lot of food plants. And so you will find things like our fig tree and our gummy berries, and we even have apricots and plumcots and hazelnuts and service berries, lots of edibles out there. Some of them are native plants and others are not. Our more recent direction for the garden has been towards native plants because we are now aware more and more that with all the developed land across North America in particular, there aren't as many places for wildlife to be as there used to be. And so we're trying to create at our church a habitat for the wild things that were here before we were. So I'm going to talk for a few minutes. I'm going to try not to go on too long, but that's going to be challenging for me. So interrupt me with questions anytime you want, but I do hope that we will be able to get a microphone to you because I'm hoping a lot of folks who are volunteering with the garden will get a chance to either be here today or see the video because it's the best tour I've given so far of the garden. I do a lot of digging and getting my hands dirty. I don't think my fingernails ever stay clean once the spring comes. But I don't do as much photography in the garden as I would like. So I have unearthed what I could find in my own photographs over the years. Some of them are from different periods of time. But I would love to have folks in the congregation come and take pictures of our plants and of the animals that come to visit our plants. Because, this is all about the wildlife around us. And it reminds me of Mary Oliver's injunction or question, what will you do with your one wild and precious life? And I spend part of my wild and precious life here in this garden and invite you all to do the same on a smaller scale if you want. But I also think about this garden as a reflection of our principle of respect for the interdependent web of all existence, of which we are a part. And for me, that's a big part of Unitarian Universalism. And so my time in the garden is, in a way, worship time for me. But I wanted to start off with some introduction to our garden. We've got these wing stem plants, and that's a bumblebee in the middle, pollinating the plant. And let me see if where do I need to point this to get this going? It's like not on. Power would be good. There we go. Once I turn it on, it works. No, I got it. So, are you all seeing my picture now? Oh, you're not? Oh, there you are. Now you are. All right. So first, I'm just starting with some shots of the garden. And I will walk you through some of the plants in the garden. This is from in September of 2024. People from the church, do you see where those flags are? We had a work day where people from the church helped plant plants at where those flags are located. So going through the seasons, right now, our garden looks a bit like this, the garden in winter, but spring is coming, and so, we will soon see a lot more things happening. One of our winter guests that we saw just, was it last week or the week before, our barred owl, and it seems to live out here in our woods. I was downstairs in our library, and we could see it from the windows at the side. And so the barred owl lives in the area. A barred owl can live to be about 32 years old. And they are monogamous, and so it may nest around here. It nests in cavities in trees up 20 to 40 feet high, and it just uses a hole in the tree. It doesn't really bother building a nest in there. The hole itself is enough protection. But I wish I had loaded my sound clip. You might, at my home in North Reston, I hear the barred owls far more than I see them. And their call, some people say it's like, who, here, David will do it for me. There you go. Who cooks for you is how people remember that that's what that is. Thank you. And so, what have we got? So, when we move on into spring, we will start seeing some daffodils in bloom. We will see our Nanking cherry tree with its pink blooms. I hope you all have noticed this in prior years. The tree that's on the left there is actually a plum cot tree that is a hybrid between a plum and an apricot, and we do get fruit on that. And so I need you all to help me notice, and when you see fruit on that tree, it's not just for the squirrels and the deer and the chipmunks, it's for anyone in the church who wants to try it. So later on, I'll show a picture when the fruit is on that tree. We have had a bee house, which has not been as successful as hoped. But now in spring, we're going to soon see the tendrils, the fiddleheads of the cinnamon ferns breaking through the ground on either side of the bench that's right in front of the church. And you can see the picture on the right shows the fruiting fronds of the fern, so it makes spores on those spires that give it its cinnamon name. It looks like cinnamon and you can see that it will be a whole nice thicket of ferns up there. So that's one of the things you will see as spring rolls around. We will see a lot of our bulbs. They are not native, but neither are they invasive. And so to me, a plant that is not native but is not invasive, it's a plant that plays well with others. It's a plant that does no harm. And we all love the joy of seeing daffodils in bloom. So those will probably always stay in our garden, although we've got some other non-native plants that we are kind of phasing out, but we'd rather fill in first and then remove anything that does not fit. So this, as we move into summer, we're going to see this Baptisia australis. It is a blue indigo. And if you look outside as you walk on the sidewalk that goes between our entrances, there is a structure that looks kind of like a bird cage. That's where that plant will be springing up. I put that bird cage support in there because before I did, that plant would just get leggy and it would flop onto our trail, so we couldn't walk through without knocking our plant. So the youth group helped put the bird cage support in there, and you can see the bumblebee that is on this. And if you take a look, you can see on its back legs those little yellow pollen sacs that it has filled. So it's doing its job of pollinating the plant while also getting its own meal of nectar. So that is a nice long blooming plant that I hope you all will get a chance to enjoy when we get into summer. In early summer, we also have this, can you see on the left? Those are pale blue, though they look kind of white. Amsonia hubrechtii. I'm sorry, with my biology major, I learned Latin names, and common names can be tricky because common names are so common that one common name may apply to numerous different plants. So the Latin name has clarity, even though it doesn't have good memorability. I guess this is a starflower, but Amsonia is what a lot of people call it. And then on the right, this is fleabane. It's like a little daisy, and you can see we've got a skipper butterfly on that one. If you looked closely, you would see it's a butterfly and not a moth, because its antennas are straight and have like a little ball at the end, instead of a moth has got feathery antennas. And so it's a beautiful little pollinator, and the number of tiny pollinators that come to fleabane is really remarkable. It is a plant that volunteers in my yard, so when it does, I put a little fence around it so that my husband doesn't mow that part of the yard, and until the blooms are done in, the end of May, June, then I'll cut it down and let him mow. So I hope you'll enjoy the fleabane when they start to bloom. Now, these are some of our milkweed plants, and if you can see the one on the left, can you see there's a beetle on the underside of the leaf called a milkweed beetle? It also has a Latin name, and in its Latin name, it says it's a four-eyes beetle or a longhorn beetle, and if you were able to zoom in on its face, you would see the reason it's called four eyes. At first, I thought it was because it's got 4 dots on its wings, 2 on each that look like eye spots, but also this guy, its antennas actually bisect the eye. So on the left and on the right, there's an upper and a lower eye. So it does literally have 4 eyes. Fascinating bug, and it eats the sap of the milkweed plant. And so like the monarch that we associate so strongly with the milkweed plants, it becomes bad tasting to predators. And so that's part of not only how it gets its food, but it specializes because that's one of its defenses. Now the one on the right, you can see the common milkweed is opening up its ball of blooms. Okay, so we have a lot of common milkweed. I'm actually removing a few. So for anyone who wants to join the garden group on any of our work days, one of the benefits that you can get is sometimes we actually divide and send home some of the plants that we don't have room for in our garden. So if you want a milkweed plant, don't put it in your home garden unless you want it to spread, because it will. I don't have this one in my home garden because it's not that big a garden. But there are milkweed relatives. The orange flowering butterfly weed is better behaved and still feeds the monarchs. Now this is one of can you see the red berries in this picture? This is planted by the permaculture committee. These are gumi berries. And when they are on the plant, June, July, the plant gets weighed down so that its branches are heavy with this fruit. And I hope people will start recognizing that this is an edible fruit. You can pick these, you can make a syrup from them a friend mixes it in her martinis. You can use it to make a jelly, but it is full of vitamins, and unfortunately, it can be invasive, and so it is a plant that I have not seen it spread outside of our garden, but it's one that I'm so ambivalent about. The birds love to eat the berries. Yes. Oh, hold on. Let's get the microphone to you so that it can be heard on video as well.
I was going to ask if you could repeat that name, and to me that looks like a lot of different berries that I see, and I believe my understanding is that some of them may be poisonous. So how can we tell those apart from others?
And I'm not sure I can give you enough information today for you to recognize a gumi berry in the wild. Gumi is spelled G-O-U-M-I. And it is related to olive plants. And in fact, it's closely related to the autumn olive, which is a terrible invasive plant that just spreads like crazy. And so you may find, often when you find in the wild around here berries that look similar to this, they are the autumn olive. Those are edible as well. So I don't, it's not a hard one to learn, but I do encourage you before you eat anything in the wild to really learn it carefully. But the ones, if you see these berries in our church garden, they are edible. We don't have any non-edibles in our garden. And so there's the gummy berry, and in front of it, can you see the white flowers are yarrow plants that the pollinators enjoy. So please feel free to ask questions whenever you want to. Now on the side of our walkway near the steps up here, in June we've got these white spires of bloom that are called Penstemon digitalis, but they are beard tongue, foxglove beard tongue. They're not actually related to the plants that we know from English gardens called foxgloves, but there's enough similarity in the way they look that the common name overlaps, even if the botanical derivation of the plant does not. So if you take a look, it's hard to see, but the picture that's on the right, there's actually a couple of I'm not sure if they're bees or wasps mating inside that flower. And so if you see these flowers when they're in bloom, I see a lot of pictures on the internet of bee butts that are sticking out because the nectar is deep inside that tubular flower. And so the bees are going in to get the nectar. Of course, they're picking up pollen along the way. The pollen is helping the plants make their seeds for the next generation, and it can be nutritious as well, but it's mainly the sweet nectar that they're going for. In June, we also start seeing along the walkway the spiderwort flowers in bloom. Do you see the purple on the left? And they come in different shades, so the individual flower on the right is more of a magenta. We've actually got some spiderworts in the garden that's around the crabapple tree, and that's in the kind of elevated garden. And some of the plants have this straight green foliage, some of them have purple foliage, and some of them have very light green chartreuse foliage. So we've got a variety of different spiderwort plants that are here. Now those blooms, each one is going to last only a day, but if you take a look, can you see the pink one has got other buds around it? So it blooms for a long period of time, but then it gets too tall and starts to flop over and flop onto our trails. And so that's when we cut it off and hope sometimes it will actually be able to grow a new set of blooming stalks for later on in the year, okay? Now here is, on the left, this is a young milkweed plant. Can you see that the flowers are still in their bud shape, and there is a jumping spider in the middle of that? So even all these flowering plants, there is a lot of wildlife going on in the plants. The one on the right is the caterpillar of a swallowtail butterfly, and it is they will feed on parsley and dill for any of you all who have herb gardens, but this is a native plant, golden Alexander or Zizia aurea, that we have in our garden that will be an early bloomer in May or so. And so one of the goals of a native plant garden, native plants don't have a long blooming period like the plants that have been bred for the horticultural trade. They select ones that have a long blooming period because that's what people like. But for the plants, they need to bloom when they've got pollinators that they need that are available to pollinate so they can make their seeds and reproduce, and then they stop. And so if the blooming period is only going to be 2 or 3 weeks, then what you want to do is have a variety of plants in the garden so that there's always something in bloom. And during the time that the Zizia aurea has its yellow flowers that look like the flowers of a dill plant, there's not a lot else going on. And so it's good to have that yellow there, and it's good to get the food for the early pollinators. Now here on the left is again, the center of a milkweed plant. And I don't know how well you can see it, but that's actually the larva of a ladybug. Okay? And it is a ferocious predator. It's got big jaws. It'll climb along and it'll eat aphids. And so they are great things to have in any garden. And then you can see on the right, it has become an adult ladybug. So we've got that happening, you know, all life goes on around this building. And when the world is too much with us, sometimes it's really nice to go into the garden where, you know, a ladybug larva always becomes an adult ladybug and not a milkweed bug. You know, there are things you can rely on out in nature. Yes?
Just comment, in English it's called a ladybird, but I think it's a nicer name than
Ladybird, yes. But they're actually, both the larva and the adult are ferocious predators. I meant to put in a cartoon that shows humans looking and saying, oh, look at the peaceful garden. And then you look up close and it's a ferocious ladybug saying, kill, kill, die, with an aphid half eaten in its mouth. So the world is not as calm and peaceful as we seem to think it is if you're an active participant in that ecosystem. But you can see on the right, that is the bloom of a purple coneflower that is getting ready to bloom. So this is early side of the summer. Oops, I got my fleabane in there again with the Zebulon skipper butterfly. To me, the cool thing about this butterfly is it's almost like a space-age fighter jet, the way it's got a pair of wings that are down low and then a pair of wings that are up high, and it kind of looks impossible until you see it fly. And so they're very cool bugs in my mind. Oh, now I'm back to the gummy berry on the right. Can you see those red berries? But on the left, we've got service berries. Now they are a native plant, and if you see red ones, they are not ripe yet. They're similar to blueberries in a lot of ways. And so if you see a few on there that are turning purple or blueberry colored blue, then they are getting ripe. And so if you see them out there, you're welcome to eat some of those too, if you can get to them before the birds and squirrels and all of those do. And the other thing is that another part of nature is that everything that's out there growing is also, there's wildlife that wants to eat it. And so not only is it the ones we see like the squirrels and the birds, but here there is a fungus, cedar apple rust, that actually has a complex life cycle where it spends some of its time on the service berries. It makes these orange blobby things and it affects the fruit. And after it lives on the service berry or anything in the rose family, like our crabapple trees, or apple trees are in the rose family. So after a year on the rose relative, then the fungus goes to a cedar tree and has another part of its life cycle on the cedar tree. And so because we have so many native cedar trees around us, there's no way to really stop the rust from also hitting our service berries. And so some years it does and we don't get any fruit. This year we did get some fruit, although again, I think it went to the birds and the squirrels. I'm not sure if anyone but me ate a berry off of that one. Yes?
If you want to eat those berries, should you check to see if the fungus is on them? Or how can you tell?
If the fungus is on them, you can still eat it. It just won't taste as sweet. And you'll see orange spiky knobs. It won't look normal. It'll look like it's been like it's got an alien growing inside it, because it does.
And what is the texture of the berry when you eat it?
It's a lot like a blueberry. So it's kind of mushy inside. It's not quite as sweet as most blueberries. We've actually got a wild blueberry growing out in our front area that I should point out to you all sometime. I don't have it in my slideshow. So, you know, if I am able to catch it when it's ripe and bring some in, I'll be happy to share. But, you know, it's only a few at a time, and it's only in the years when the rust doesn't get it. So this is on the other side of the driveway near where there's a fire hydrant, can you see the white blooms there? That is a native fringe tree that just has grown there. And I've got a fringe tree I'm going to put into the garden, but it's lovely to be here in Reston on a piece of land that I think there's 7 acres on this piece of land. And so we've got, I'm sorry?
It's 12.
12 maybe,
acres.
maybe 12 acres. So we've got a lot of native plants that naturally live around us. To give them the best chance, it helps a lot if we fight off the invasive plants, because the invasive plants like to spread and take over. And they take away areas where the native plants could grow. So if you have an area where the Pachysandra carpets the area that's down near the gate that goes to the kids' playground out there, the Pachysandra is so thick that nothing else can grow there, but we still have the dogwood tree planted there in honor of Ed Nussbaum, and we've got service berries and others in that area around near there. So I'd be happy to point those out to you all anytime that you want. So here's one of the critters that I have found in our garden. The picture on the left is from the garden. You can see that the turtle is hunkered down into the weedy grass that's in there that I'm trying to get out. But he lives there because there's a lot of good food. The one on the right is a picture I took at one of Fairfax County parks because right now I work part-time as a roving interpreter for the Fairfax County Park Authority. And so I was out at this park with a bunch of 7th grade students, and we were having a meaningful watershed educational experience, MeWe. Someone needs to teach the Park Authority how to make better acronyms. But we were delighted to see this turtle, and we got, some of the kids got to touch it. And if they remember nothing else from that field trip, they will remember that they got to touch a turtle, and it feels like bone, because in fact the shell is made of bone. And so I tell them, you see those silly cartoons that show a turtle hopping out of its shell and doing a little dance? Well, of course they cannot do that because their shell is part of their backbone. And so that shell is part of them. They can't get out, but it's a nice way to connect with young people who may not have had a lot of nature experience in their lives. And they're right out here. And so the other thing I wanted to tell you about this is now called a woodland box turtle. Some people still use the eastern box turtle name. And let's see, can anyone tell in this picture what color the eyes are? If it has red eyes, it's 90% of the ones with red eyes are male. And the female often has yellow or brown eyes, but that's not reliable. If you really want to tell what gender a box turtle is, you have to lift it up and look on the underside, because if it is a male, when they mate, the male mounts the female, so it has a little concave portion on the underside of its shell so it can stay there a little bit. And so if you lift up a turtle and see the underside of the shell, and it's got a sunken in area on the bottom half, the half near the tail, then that's a male. The box turtle is a special because on its underside, its plastron, the shell that's on the below side, it has a hinge, and so it can actually pull its arms and legs and head and tail in and close its shell like a box in which it is closed. And so that protects it from predators. And these turtles live to be, I think someone found one that lived more than 100 years in the wild. But 80 years is not an unreasonable expectation if it doesn't cross paths with a car or a dog. But anyway, they lay 2 to 7 eggs. It is illegal to keep a box turtle as a pet, although some people don't know that law was recently passed in 2021. So there was a time that people would take a turtle they found in their yard and keep it inside. But with the long lives that they live, and they are omnivores, so they eat worms and bugs, but they also eat berries and May apples and mushrooms. And so they have a very small territory. It's less than an acre that they roam in, and they get to know where the food is in their territory. And so if you take a turtle out of its territory and put it somewhere else, you've harmed its chances to survive. Yeah.
Why is it illegal to own a box turtle as opposed to other turtles?
Well, the next turtle I'm going to show you is one you would not want to own because it could bite your finger off. Box turtles are cute and walk slowly. They can go pretty fast, but it's a problem. It's been a problem, and in fact, turtles are often trafficked in the exotic pet trade. And if you clear an area of its turtles, it can take 10 years for the population to return in any sizable numbers. And so it's to protect the wild populations. Also, turtles can spread salmonella. So if a child is handling a turtle too much, or an adult, then it can cause them to get sick. And so, but I think it's more for the protection of the turtles themselves than for the public health issue that they also present. So here's kind of the star of our show today. Can you see, this is a bench that is in one of those peninsulas in our parking lot. Right now there's a bench that's still there. So one day when I came to work on the garden, I see this thing underneath the bench. And so some of you may have seen that I hung this picture with a sign saying, "Don't disturb this bench," because that is a snapping turtle who is an aquatic turtle most of the time. It's going to live in a stream or a pond, but to lay its eggs, it comes up and it digs a hole, and it lays, how many eggs? I've got notes here. It can lay anywhere from a dozen up to 3 dozen eggs in that hole. And the eggs are, instead of having a hard shell like a bird's egg, it's kind of a leathery, soft shell. And so it buries them in a hole under there. I think it liked having the bench as a bit of a shelter, because actually in that same area, there was another spot where it started to dig a hole and abandoned it. I don't know why. But you can see this critter, now you can see the long tail it's got, and it's digging because it's going to lay the eggs there. And when I kept an eye on this turtle, and about an hour and a half later, it was done and had gone back on its way. And so I wanted to protect these eggs, because if a raccoon or a fox can find these eggs and dig them up, then they're full of protein and a good meal for the animal. So I put the kind of crate people keep their dogs in, I put it on top there because it had kind of big holes on the bottom side. I took the tray out so that the turtles could dig up through those big holes, but then the foxes and such could not dig up the nest. And I don't think I positioned the protection as well as I should have, because I had to move it to put it over. This is when I went back. So this was May 29th is when these eggs were laid, and I had read that it's 2 or 3 or 4 months for them to hatch. So I don't know when exactly they did hatch, but I did notice that the hole had been dug up. And I spoke with Keturah and her students at the school, found baby turtles. This is not, they didn't get a picture, but this is the size that they were out on the playground. Now, fortunately, adults noticed that the kids were interested in something, and so they kept the turtle handled gently and made sure it got to the other side of the fence. But we did have hatching snapping turtles, and I don't know how far it goes, which body of water is its home, but it's fascinating to me that this is where it chose to lay its eggs. Noni, can you get the microphone? Who's got the mic? Mike has the mic.
I was just going to note that I've seen snapping turtles in Lake Anne, for example,
Right.
right? Which, I mean, that seems rather far to go, but like I know I've seen like ones that big, rather large.
And you know, I meant to bring, but I didn't download the photo onto my. Huntley Meadows is one of Fairfax County parks that has a freshwater marsh on it. Well, people go there with big fancy cameras to take pictures of birds. And there was a big kerfluffle, I think it was in 2021, people got pictures of a big snapping turtle. They can weigh up to 50 pounds.
Do you think they smell the water from a distance?
They smell?
Can they smell the water? That's find
I
the
don't
water?
know. It's a good question.
Maybe.
They might. But there was an adult, actually they can go up to 75 pounds. There was an adult snapping turtle that had grabbed a white egret, a heron, by the leg. And it was an hour of fighting. And at first, you know, the egret thought it could just shake it off. But the photos show that there was a point when you could see fear in the bird's eyes. You know, it's like, I'm not sure I'm going to make it out of this. It did, but it had some real injuries. So, you know, these guys are ravenous. They eat a lot of fish and worms and crayfish, and they will eat a lot of baby ducklings. Get eaten by snapping turtles, and so it's part of the food chain. So here is a picture that shows our yuccas in bloom. The yuccas, to me, don't seem like they should be, but they are native to Virginia, and so that spiky plant that looks like it belongs in a desert does have those spires of white flowers, and apparently there's a yucca moth that pollinates them at night. Now this, if you can tell where this is along the walkway, going from this entrance, walking towards the other entrance, on the right, can you see the fruit on the plum cot tree? The little orange dots in there? And I never seem to notice them until they're fallen off and smushed on the sidewalk. But if you see a plum cot, give it a taste. Let me know. I have not tried eating those. So some of our plants that we get, we grow partly because they are host to butterflies. And so the caterpillars eat plants, and caterpillars are one of the main foods for birds. So if we didn't have the right native plants to feed the caterpillars, we wouldn't have the birds around that we do. So here on the left is a part of the passion flower vine. I can't believe I don't have a picture of the passion flower itself. It's an amazing bloom. But these variegated fritillary butterfly caterpillars also eat violets. And so I've seen them on both. And so there's the caterpillar and the adult butterfly both in our garden. Mountain mint is great for pollinators. We've got a lot of it growing along the sidewalk in this shaded area. But it's got pollinators I wouldn't expect. Now you can see on the left we've got a hair-streaked butterfly. If you look on the back of its wings, it's got those appendages that it can move. It looks like false antenna, so that if a bird wants to attack it, maybe it'll attack the back of the butterfly and not the head. So that's a defensive camouflage that it's got. But if you look over on the right, some of the pollinators you get on these mountain mint are wasps and honeybees. And I never thought of wasps as being pollinators, but they can be. And the ones that you find on the mountain mint are very docile and calm. They don't sting anybody unless they get tangled up in your shirt or something, because they're just interested in the flowers. Here is one of the ones you hear a lot about, the monarch butterfly. You can see individual variation. These are two different caterpillars. You can see the stripes are a little different widths. And so we do have a number of monarch butterflies that these are relatives of milkweed. They're in the milkweed plant family that the caterpillars are living on. But even when an egg is laid on a milkweed and the caterpillar hatches, its life is full of dangers. This one was actually at my home garden, but can you see that this caterpillar that was hanging there, and I was watching it in my garden, I went out the next day, and this predatory stink bug had gotten the caterpillar and is sucking all the juices out of it. So that that's why they lay so many eggs. because a lot of the caterpillars don't get to maturity. But here is one that did. And this is a new one that had just eclosed. That's what you call it when they emerge from their chrysalis. Can you see in the lower left that kind of white papery looking thing? That is the shell of the chrysalis that it broke out from. And so it was still letting its wings dry. They kind of need an hour to pump them full of fluid because they have been all folded up inside that chrysalis. And so its wings are still enlarging. And when it opened its wings as a brand newly hatched monarch butterfly, its colors are the brightest you've ever seen. So I hope someday you'll be lucky enough to catch that. Here's an American painted lady butterfly. The caterpillars are on our pussy toes plants. And there's the adult on a leaf of our fig tree. So we also have a fig tree out there, not native. They like to live in the Mediterranean Sea area, but they produce a lot of fruit, and you guys are welcome when you see. Now, they're not ripe until they are turning purplish. Some, at least our figs turn purplish when they're ripe. But when they do, you're welcome to pick one and eat them. When you break it off, there's kind of a latex, like milkweed sap, a rubbery, and so I've had sticky hands after picking figs, and you kind of want to go ahead and get it in your mouth without getting the sticky on your lips, but they can be very sweet and delicious, and you can peel that part off if you choose to, or you can eat it right out of your hand. This is one of the little snakes that's out there. This is a Decay's snake. And as an adult, it's about 1 foot long. So they're the most common snake in Virginia. They're harmless to people. But we've got them out there. I wish I had also included a picture of a worm snake because they're uncommon, but in one day, Susan and I found 2 worm snakes out there on different parts of the garden. They're brown on top and pink on the underside, and their main food is worms. And as adults, they're about 1 foot long, and they just loved it when we were spreading mulch around, and we had piles of mulch that had been dumped with a wheelbarrow but hadn't been spread out yet, and that's where we found them looking happiest. So there is a lot of life out there. This is going into the fall. I've been kind of taking you through the seasons of the garden, and now we're getting into fall here, and those purple blooms in the picture on the left are the kind of aster that's called October skies, and it's a blue blooming, so it blooms in October and on into November. It's a great time to have it and goldenrod in your garden because birds are starting to migrate, and those plants are attracting insects that are going to feed the migrating birds. So it's not only important to have different bloom times so that people can enjoy the garden, but also there are different forms of wildlife that need different plants in the garden at different seasons of the year. The one that is on the right is a red chokeberry, and they're actually not owned by the church. You know, as you come by and you're driving in, there's that collection of shrubs immediately on your left. And so you can see that in fall, the berries turn red, and so do the foliage. And those can also be eaten, although they're very astringent, and so they're not very tasty. I wish I had done a better job of featuring our persimmon tree. Let me see if I've got a picture somewhere. Do you all know that we've got the one garden where there is a stone path that walks up, and there's a tree in the middle of a circle of rocks? And that is a persimmon tree. And I'm afraid I did not include it in my pictures. At some point, the persimmons, when they are not ripe, they're not poisonous, but you wouldn't want to eat them. They make you pucker up. They're so astringent. And so you really have to wait until they're almost feeling mushy. So I often miss them because I'm waiting for them to get ripe. And by the time they get ripe, they fall down and a squirrel eats them or whatever. But I have made persimmon bread and sold it at the church auction before. Yes?
Wait, please, wait.
Yes.
Wait.
She asked if we have an issue with deer. Yes, we do. Yes, we do. And so there are, there are cardinal flowers that we rarely get to see. There are blue cardinal flowers that are blue lobelia that we rarely get to see because they get eaten. So I'm not planting those as much anymore. In my home garden, I try to spray the deer off stuff. But, last year I had these lovely big cardinal flowers this tall, and I was watching the hummingbirds come and feed from them. But I didn't keep spraying often enough, and one day, they'd only been up and open blooms for about a week, and they all got eaten down to the ground. So it's a challenge, as anyone who gardens at home might know. Other questions?
Other questions? Thank you. That was amazing. There must be more questions. Wait for the microphone. Not well.
And
Thank you for sharing this.
We try to get our youth involved in the garden, and so a couple weeks ago, they hung some bird houses that you might see one hanging from the persimmon tree and another one hanging in this area that's next to the elevated walkway. And so those bird houses have very small holes because the goal is for them to house chickadees. But we've also got the house finches that will take over any nest box they can find. So we've got the hole that is small enough to exclude the house sparrows, but to allow the chickadees to come. And so I taught a lesson with the kids where we watched a video that showed in 8 minutes, 54 days from when the nest is first started until when the baby birds fledge. And so I'm hoping we're gonna get to, we have had birdhouses out there before, but we don't have cameras in ours, so having a video from someone who did was really special. But we've raised our own chickadees out here. Yes, Sterling.
Sterling.
Several years back, we had a copperhead snake.
We have had
on our
copper. Thank you for
grounds,
mentioning
and,
that.
And I was wondering if there are any poisonous snakes in the area.
So the only poisonous snake that would be in this garden would be a copperhead. I have never seen one. With all the hours I've spent in the garden, I've never seen one in our garden. But I know that the school has seen the copperhead. And so as much as and they contacted me and said, what are we going to do? We've got to keep our kids safe. And so there is actually a trap out there that is meant to deal with copperhead snakes. They call it a pest control company. And so as much as I wish we didn't have to, I don't know a way to keep the kids safe. And when you make an environment that is welcoming to all of the chipmunks and voles and mice and frogs and turtles and skinks, we get a lot of skink lizards with the blue tails. All of that is food for copperheads and others. And so there's no way to make it a good habitat without sometimes having an unwanted guest.
So thank you for an amazing talk, and thank you for all the work you do around our gardens.
And I should have had a slide that had my website, my webpage for signing up to work in the garden on our work days. We're scheduling work days 2 times a month. And so I can give you the little slip of paper, or you can check the church newsletter. Next Saturday from 2 until 4, there will be me and others helping out in the garden. We had Angeline, who is 6 years old, and her mother out there helping weed and put plants in and say hello to some worms. So it's fun for all ages, and you can come by for a short time and see what you can do.
There's so much visual beauty and also the science beauty because of the symbiosis between the plants and the insects and the butterflies. It's all amazing stuff. So thank you. And I have one commercial, if you'll excuse me. A commercial break. So this is not on this subject, but this week I have published a book called Space Times Matter, 100 short stories about the universe. And there are 82 texts, short stories about subjects, mostly science, astronomy, and physics, and also 18 science poems in the back. So it makes 100 pieces in here. And it's available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And I've got some little promo cards that you're able to take one, which will tell you about it. So I'd be very happy if you buy some of my books. Thank you. Thank you.